And welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lobkin. A lot on the plate as always. We start out with Mr. Hare himself, something out of Central Casting. He could have played the President of the United States in a movie, might have been able to play the president, but actually being the president's another issue. He's now giving health care to illegal aliens. Your thought, Dr. Lopkin, if you were a hardworking, blue collar kind of guy or gal, would that piss you off or not?
Yeah, it is absolutely ridiculous how states like California want to give migrants, whoever else, all of these benefits. They have no money to pay for them. They're taking taxpayer money. They have a what, $6 billion deficit, I believe, at this point in
Yeah,
California.
who's counting? Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's a huge deficit. Yes, and it was artificially suspended because of COVID aid, but the chicken or the chickens have come home to roost, haven't they?
Yeah, the United States federal government bailed out California, and California could not make that stick. Now, to give you just a contrast, the same bill that bailed out California also bailed out Connecticut at the same time. The state of Connecticut got its fiscal house in order and was able to avoid deficits. California almost immediately went to a $6 billion deficit. That's with a B. That is absolutely unheard of for a state. And yet
Agreed.
he keeps wanting to spend money on all these programs that are not for. Are they supporting veterans? No. Are they supporting citizens? No. They're not even, supporting legal California residents.
Well, it doesn't get into the whole thing of, a guy, people like Newsom, elitist libs like him, do they really give a shit about veterans? Do they even know what a veteran is? Uh, do they even care about America, or is it just one big global dumping ground? I'd say it's the latter. How does that sound?
I don't know what they care about other than their own power. I think that's the bottom line. Gavin Newsom wants to be president, and he thinks that, oh, let's give these folks all of these benefits and give them the right to vote so they'll vote for me because I gave them all this money. It's buying votes.
But isn't it disgusting when you put your own political agenda ahead of? You're willing to throw America down the shitter just for your own benefit. Disgusting.
Well, it's disgusting, but it's not exactly unheard of. It's been going on for decades.
Yeah, but I think it's reached new levels. I'm sorry, it has.
Oh, yes, it
Uh,
definitely has.
Especially with the Democrats. It's they knew, for instance, that Biden was completely mentally not fit for office, and yet they still perpetuated that lie. So basically, they're jeopardizing America just to win an election. And speaking how mentally unavailable he is, please explain. You're a very smart guy. That's why you got the title of Dr. Eric Lopkin. Um, can you explain to me how his Secretary of Defense was AWOL, okay, and Biden or no one else in that administration, but Biden in particular, didn't know that Lloyd Austin was gone for like a week.
Didn't
Like,
didn't
is that
didn't know he
scary
was
or
yeah,
what?
didn't know he was gone, didn't know he had prostate cancer, didn't know he was going in for surgery. They were completely in the dark. And this is what happens when you have a dementia-addled moron at the helm. Because
But
he
the rest of his Ivy League, 30 something morons, I mean, they were asleep at the switch too.
well,
The associates of the associates.
because they haven't had a cabinet meeting since October. They have not. Now, think about the ramifications of this. He has not had a meeting with the Secretary of Defense since before the October 7th Hamas attacks. We have troops in Syria and Iraq who are taking fire. And Joe
Hmm.
Biden has not had a meeting with his Secretary of Defense the entire time.
I agree 100%. If we had an actual, real working press, if it was Donald Trump, what percentage of the broadcast time on CNN would be devoted to that issue? Out of 24 hours, what would you say, 22?
20, about 22. And
Here you go.
it's really funny because I happened to come across a clip a couple of days ago of Scott Pelley, who used to be the anchor of the
Yeah.
CBS Evening News when it was still a newscast. And
When?
the clip was him talking about how important it was for the press to be investigating these things, because that is what keeps our leaders in line. That is what keeps democracy rolling. And of course, CBS got rid of him, put Nora O'Donnell in, who just, couldn't care
Oh,
less and lets everything
talk
go.
talk about entitlement. She's a little Beltway spoiled brat. She grew up in the Beltway, went to little Georgetown University, has the street cred of like what, maybe a squirrel?
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
somebody
it's
who,
unwatchable. It's
this is someone
unwatchable.
who, remember, before Nora O'Donnell took over as anchor of the evening news, she did CBS This Morning. And on
Mm.
that morning show, routinely had Adam Schiff coming on lying about the Steele dossier, and not once did she question what he was saying. This is how far the press has fallen. This is why we have a Secretary of Defense that's apparently accountable to no one and can just, wander off, go AWOL. We have a president who has been lying about his involvement in his son's business for years, if not
Ever.
decades. You know, we have a government that is falling apart at the seams, and our media has become an arm of the Democratic Party instead of the fifth estate, which it's supposed to be, to keep an eye on both parties.
That train has left the station. I would say probably. Um, I would say the new millennial. I think it started with George W. and the infatuation with him, and it continued with the covering for Obama. So it's been going on for at least 20 years.
Yeah.
There's always a left lean in the media, but you look at Walter Cronkite, you'd be shocked on how fair he was. But those days are over. But how about Mr. Austin? Um, a guy who probably checked all the right boxes. We'll just leave it at that. No Mensa candidate either. Like
No,
having
clearly.
a no having a job at Walmart. Okay, what happens if you don't call your boss and tell him that you'll be sick or her
Yeah,
that you'll be sick?
you
I
get
think you
five.
get fired. Thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing. If you work in the private sector and you disappear for a week without telling anybody, you get fired. If you're in the military and you disappear for a week without telling
Court
anybody,
martialed
you get court martialed and arrested. Austin needs to be removed from his position.
immediately.
And Biden has already said that's not going to happen.
Why do you think he said it's not going to happen? Let me just shed my little view, whatever that's worth. I think he's got so much bad shit going on. He doesn't know. He doesn't need any more attention to how effed up things are.
I think
Plus,
that's
it
a,
goes. Go ahead.
I think that's a good call on why he's, it's another, flaw in his policies. It's another flaw in his personnel. He wants to sweep it under the rug. Now, ironically, Austin could have gotten away with this so easily. All he had to do is say, "What are you talking about? I told the president myself." Maybe he forgot.
Maybe, who knows? All I know is that
I mean,
it is the key. It is the Keystone Cops You had the guy, what is Kennedy, whatever. The Middle East has never been quieter. Week later, it explodes. These people, let's face it, have no clue. They're not even talking to each other. This is scary. And you
No,
have the boy genius at the helm. And speaking of the boy genius, he was giving this hard hitting address, supposedly, on the January 6th so called insurrection. And didn't go over too well. And, he basically looked like basically you could play the theme song for the commercial "Visiting Angels" as his wife led him off the stage. It's not going well.
no,
I mean, it's bad.
he's the Walking Dead at this point.
Dead. It's
And
over.
the January 6th commission, by the way, a new poll came out, and the January 6th commission managed to convince 30% of independents and 13% of Democrats that the FBI was actually behind January 6th. This
It
is
was a
how
show trial of
no,
nonsense. Was
this
it
is
bad
how good
judging?
they
No. Oh
this
yeah, they
is
were geniuses. It was a kangaroo court.
yes.
Now, did Trump have bad judgment? Yes, he did. Did he incite an insurrection? No, he did not. He said we're going to walk over peacefully. Okay. Could he have done more once it started? Yes, he could, but he did not incite an insurrection. Do you agree or not, Dr.
No,
Lopkin?
not only did he not incite an insurrection. Okay, first of all, there's video. He was on live television stating for people to protest peacefully.
Yes.
He went on Twitter during the riot telling people to go home, and Twitter removed the post.
So, how do these cases even exist,
Yeah,
Dr. Lopkin? It's a sham. It's bullshit. It's complete
it
bullshit.
is a sham. We have degenerated into a banana
Third
republic
world
because the deep state cannot abide by Donald Trump. They want him gone by any means possible. And
because
they
he's a
know,
threat.
yeah, they know if they try to get him out in another election, thanks to the actions of Biden, there's a really good chance of Trump getting another term.
Oh, I think the more this goes on, the more it's going to happen. I mean, if you look at Biden in that January 6th address, that was red meat for his people, whatever you want to call it. He looked like a weak, senile old man being led around like you would if you had, Grandpa Johnson. He comes over for Thanksgiving and he's totally out of it, but he's a nice guy and you walk him around the yard. He's not ready for prime time. There's no way. Come on.
He was never ready for prime time. He wasn't ready for prime time in his prime. He was
Agreed.
never qualified to be
The dumbest of the
president.
dumb.
This is why he stepped down from previous primaries, not even getting to the general election. He was caught for plagiarism. He was never qualified. But the
Yeah.
Democratic National Committee knew if they didn't prop him up in 2020, then the Democrats were going to vote in as their candidate a left-wing wacko who was never going to be able to beat Trump. And that was
But
all they cared about, was beating
what
Trump.
but it was also what is also really about is showing them for their true colors. They are the party of Bernie Sanders. That is their ideology. So they wanted to put some smoke and mirrors into the equation, resurrect Uncle Joe that ran as a moderate, probably didn't even know that he was running, and now we have what we have. But there is some talk. A analyst at J.P. Morgan predicts that Biden will drop out. We even had Michelle Obama talking about how terrified she is about uh, 24, and some suggest that was the opening salvo in "I'm available, I'm
It,
available, I'm available." What do
It
you think?
it could be. There's been a lot of talk about there being a bait and switch where Biden will go basically through to the convention, and then the Democrats will put somebody else in as he pulls
And it'll
out.
be Michelle.
I don't know that it'll be Michelle. I don't think she can win, quite frankly. But
No, you're 100% correct. Because I like that's why I asked that question. I think she's great on Oprah and maybe The View. Held up to the bright lights, not going to happen.
no, and she was talking about how she's terrified about
Hmm.
2024. She's terrified about what's going to happen to the country. Funny, she wasn't so terrified when her husband funded terrorism by giving Iran billions of dollars. She wasn't terrified when her husband weaponized the IRS against his political opponents. She wasn't terrified when her husband weaponized the FBI against the Associated Press.
And
Who
spied
is
on Trump.
Yes, who is really the dictators here? These people who keep yelling, "Oh, Trump is going to be a dictator. Trump, democracy is in danger if Trump wins." These are folks that threw democracy out the window.
And
They
they
have
appeal to low IQ voters that would believe, that Colonel Sanders is going to give everyone free chicken today. They're dumb. They're dumb. They don't look at the facts. They're all emotionally based morons. Agreed or not?
Yeah, the big problem is that that is what the party is based on. Let's appeal to emotion. We saw this when Roe v. Wade was overturned. The Democrats, oh, they're taking away your freedom. They're taking no, all the overturning of Roe v. Wade, all it did was it said the states get to make the law instead of the federal government. It didn't
It was a
say
bad ruling anyway. Even Ginsburg
yes,
said it was shitty.
Ginsburg warned about this for years, that Roe v. Wade deserved to be overturned because it was bad case law. That is what the Supreme Court said. The Democrats turned it into an emotional issue, and it worked for them in both 2022 and 2023. That is one of the reasons that Ron DeSantis cannot win in 2024, because Florida put some pretty draconian abortion regulations in place, and that will play into the Democrats' hands and give them everything they need to rally their base to victory.
Well, speaking of DeSantis, we have a new poll out that Nikki Haley is now asserting herself as a true number two, second in the horse race. In fact, in New Hampshire, it's Trump 39, Haley 32. I don't think DeSantis survives Iowa and New Hampshire. I think it's going to be a two-person race after New Hampshire. What do you think?
I
DeSwanny, whatever he's done, he's a clown. It's
I
over.
well
That guy's done.
I think Vaswani is not going to survive. I don't think Christie is going to
No,
survive.
goodbye.
Um, can
We're down
DeSantis
to two.
survive those two? Possibly, but I don't think he's going to survive much longer than that. He might make
After
it to South.
Carolina, it's over.
Yeah,
South
he's not.
Carolina's her territory.
Yeah, he's not making it past South Carolina. Nikki Haley, I think, will go. She's going to give Trump a run for his money. Can she beat him? I don't know. He's still very far ahead in a lot of polls. But when you look at the head to heads between her and Biden, she beats Biden by a greater percentage than Trump does.
Well,
And in
she's got
fact,
none of the baggage.
exactly. She does, if she becomes the Republican candidate, all of those Democrats that don't want Biden to be their candidate, but don't want another Trump term, they've suddenly got no reason to come out.
There is no question in my mind that she will be the female version of Ronald Reagan, not in message, not in ideology, in electoral decisiveness. She will destroy numbnuts because exactly all of what you're saying is 100% correct. the good doctor. The abortion issue, pretty much out the window. She's extremely moderate on that. She got
She
none of the
is. And
baggage.
I think, we were just talking about Michelle Obama. I think if Nikki Haley becomes the candidate, I think she needs to pull Michelle Obama's quote about Hillary Clinton saying, if you don't vote for her, you're not if women don't vote for her, they're not being true to themselves. Well, you could say the same thing for Nikki Haley if you believe that.
I think that's a good idea, and it'll be interesting. I think it's things are still volatile. I believe I know a lot of conservative friends. They love Trump's policies, but they have Trump fatigue. I am one of them. So I think if it's true, and I think my analysis is that she has to be do herself justice in Iowa, and if she wins in New Hampshire, it's a completely new ball game. Your thoughts, Dr. Eric Lobkin?
Yeah, if she finishes first or second in Iowa and wins New Hampshire, it is an entirely new ball game. It gives her momentum going into South Carolina, which is her bailiwick,
Her turf, yep.
and that is going to upend the election. And I think Trump knows this because he keeps telling his supporters, ignore the polls. We have to act like we're 10 points behind. Don't get complacent. I think he knows his supporters might get complacent because the polls keep saying he's so far ahead.
Could be a real possibility. Also, there could be some enthusiasm because there was no real alternative. DeSantis, you could say, but he effed it up right from the get go. Um, they see a real bright light as an alternative. It could be a game changer. It was certainly
And
worth watching. I would have to say that. And I think also that's worth watching is I'd love your analysis, and I'm sure our listeners would as well. We have Fannie Willis in Georgia. Now she faces her own corruption trial. Your thoughts? Is this crap going kind of nowhere?
I think it is. She ended up
I don't think
having,
people give a shit about it. Do you
yeah,
think people give a shit about this?
no,
Number one,
she
let's
ended
break
up
it down.
she ended up
Let's break it down
having
one thing at a time, though. I know, but let's break it up one thing at a time. Do you think people are getting sick of this and knowing it's a bunch of shit? Number one, then go into her corruption. What do you think of the first question?
yeah, people are tired of all of the court cases. They think it's, political bullshit. They're tired of it. Even diehard Democrats are tired of it. As for she has a relationship with the prosecutor in the Trump case. Now, is it questionable judgment? Yes. Is it criminal? No. Do people give a damn about it? No. I don't think it's going to go
Yeah, but there is
anywhere.
some financial irregularities tied to this. So we'll see how that plays out. I think but it also points to my big takeaway is the incompetency of the people that are running this persecution slash prosecution. Just their credibility is evaporating as we speak. Am I not correct,
Well,
Dr.
again,
Love?
this is what happens when you have to rely on politicians. And yes, that the DAs are politicians. They're elected. Again, we've said this over and over again. The best and the brightest don't go into government. And
Nope, the
that,
days of Eisenhower are over.
yes.
But there is a documentation that her bro friend there had lengthy conversations with the Biden White House. It seems like God, that might be another lie. He said he has nothing to do with it. Lengthy discussions, documented,
Yeah, more and more is coming out that the Biden administration
orchestrated it.
has had a, I'm not going to say orchestrated because I don't think Joe Biden is capable of orchestrating a meal, never mind the prosecution. But he has had his hand in it. He has been kept apprised. He has been a willing participant in all of these attacks on Donald Trump. Now, what was it that they impeached Donald Trump for the second time? Trying to get information on a political adversary? If that was
Hmm.
if that was impeachable, Biden should be thrown in jail.
Here, I like that one. Absolutely correct. What do you think of the Hunter situation showing up to Congress? There's a contempt of Congress resolution that's being voted on, and he plopped his ass in today, didn't he?
Yeah, these hearings are open to the public. Any member of the public is able to go and sit and watch. For
Do you think that
Hunter
was
to
bright?
for Hunter to show up, one, it was thumbing his nose at
Yes.
Congress. That was the whole point of it. Is that a bright move? No.
Dumb.
First of all, it makes his father look even worse.
Is
Second of
that
all,
possible?
he is forgetting the fact that most of these people will still be in power after his father is gone. And they're not going to forget this. He is going to end up sitting in a jail cell just because he doesn't know enough to shut the hell up.
Well, isn't he the most? Well, his father said he's the smartest guy he's ever met. He's a
Yes,
genius.
but look at the source.
I love that. Excellent. Good one, Dr. Lobkin. Um, have in the economic realm of things. Well, let's do one more thing about Uncle Joe. He might not actually be as Uncle Joe as people think. There's a lot of reports that his people in his administration are scared to death of him because you give him any kind of bad or controversial news, he'll bite your head off. Doesn't that go hand in hand with dementia as well? He
Well,
was always an asshole. Now he's an uber asshole.
it does tend to go hand in hand with dementia, but to clarify, dementia does not make you lose your
No,
temper. What
exasperates.
what dementia really does is it brings out who the person already is. So if they were a quiet, down to earth person to begin with, they're more so. If they were an angry, violent person to begin with, they're much more so under dementia. His dementia is just exacerbating who he always was. He was never lunch pail Joe. He was never there for the common man. He was a political animal from the get-go.
A
All he
grifter. How does that
ever, yes,
sound?
all he ever cared about was himself and his family benefiting from a political career.
No doubt. Do you know what actually Ted Kennedy told Trump? That Biden was the dumbest member of the Senate. That's bipartisanship. I like that.
Yes, that's,
Any, we also have the EU, a nice anti-Semitic organization. Basically, these people, these climate people, I think they're actually hurting their cause because they're insane. Um, they basically were pointing to the fact that Israel is um, really doing a lot of damage in the global warming front with the war against Hamas, and scientifically, literally has zero impact. Of course, they don't talk about the Ukrainian war. It's
Oh,
only
no.
Israeli
No, no,
gunpowder.
no. No,
Only
no, you're
Israeli
wrong.
gunpowder causes it.
No, no,
What's that?
no.
They
You're
did that too.
wrong.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
The
Kerry
EU did
did.
it. Yes, they did it about the Ukraine also. This has
Geniuses.
been a common theme from them. They don't care about the people who are dying, but
Ah,
the warfare is harming the environment. They did
these
it.
people are nuts.
They said it in Ukraine. I believe they said it about Syria also, and now they're saying it about Israel.
Very good, credible sources. Speaking of not credible, the job growth reports were slightly overestimated just by a half a million. Coincidence, incompetency, all of the above. What do you think?
It's partly incompetence.
Hmm.
Um, it is. I will. I don't remember if it was on this podcast, but way back when I was doing a story on Connecticut's economy, and I spoke to the State Department of Labor, and they told me point blank every jobs report that they issue generally tends to be wrong, and that's why they have the corrections later on. But the federal government works the same way. It's the same methodology. It's a flawed methodology. So yeah, part of it is incompetence. Another part of it is the fact that yes, they did correct the numbers, but the media did not cover that. And in fact, from January to October, the jobs reports were revised downwards by an average of 55,000 jobs per month. So that's over five, 5.5 million jobs they overestimated by in that 10-month period.
I think it's
And,
500,000.
right, excuse me. I'm adding
Yes.
another zero. Yes, good
There
catch.
you go. Yep.
I apologize for that. Yes, it's 550,000 over the 10 months. They screwed this up, and the media, knowing that there are always revisions, didn't bother to cover it. So
That was
it's
purely coincidental, wasn't it?
yeah, it's partial. So it's partially partisanship, partially incompetence. But yeah, the jobs numbers that the administration keeps leaning on were grossly exaggerated. And you also have to add into the fact that of the jobs that were created, a large percentage of these weren't new jobs that were being created. They were jobs that went away during the pandemic and were now finally coming back. So the actual number of new jobs that were created was actually very small.
Well, that's not surprising because I think this administration, with their energy policy, their fiscal policy, has done everything to stop. It's in spite of them that we have any job growth. Um, and another thing they've done well is managing the southern border. A New York City school is closed, has been closed due to the need to house more migrants. Why is that
The,
important? Because I think it is a problem because the chickens are starting to come home to roost to even blue states, and I think people are pissed. When it was only Texas, it's Arizona, but now it's Adams, who's a moron, said that New York City will never be the same. Thank you, Joe Biden.
and he's right. And what happened with this school? I was at James Madison High School, a school I'm very familiar with. I actually had friends that graduated from Madison High School back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and this was the result of Biden snubbing Eric Adams. Because what happened was Adams went hat in hand to the federal government saying they need help, and the Biden administration ignored him. So when Eric Adams needed to move migrants, he put them on Floyd Bennett Field. Now, Floyd Bennett Field is in uh, a runway. It's basically an old, federally owned airstrip. The tents, the tent city that were erected here. Now, Adams decided to put them there because it was federally owned land, figuring if the federal government's not going to give them any money, well, we'll at least use their land. The problem is the tents were put on the runways. Well, anybody who's ever gone camping knows if you want a tent to be secure, you need to secure it to the ground. You cannot do that on a runway. So instead of being secured to the ground, they just put rocks down to hold them in place. Well, the storms that came through the Northeast over the last few days would have decimated that tent city. And not having anywhere to put them, Eric Adams decided, okay, Madison High School's only 5 miles away or so. We'll move them all there and we'll tell all of the parents not to send their kids. They'll going to remote learning. Well,
Okay, but this is an example though of putting migrants now have more economic and more and a lot of other rights that some people on the lower end of the financial spectrum don't have, and that's why a lot of black activists are saying that the Democratic convention in Chicago, because of this very issue, is not going to be all copacetic.
I hope it's not. But yes, that is the problem. The students who are, you know, the kids of New York City
Citizens.
taxpayers, citizens, they, one, had to go back to remote learning. And I believe they're going back to school in person tomorrow because the local politicians and the parents were so up in arms today they had to get the migrants out of the school. But they had to go back to remote learning. Now, what did we see over the pandemic? We saw test scores drop because they couldn't adapt to remote learning. It wasn't
Remote
just
learning is an oxymoron.
it
It doesn't
wasn't
exist.
it
Okay.
wasn't just, well, no, it does exist if it's
It does
done
not exist.
well. It
It's
does.
not being done well, and
Right.
they
It's
had the
not.
outcomes. The statistics speak for itself. It was an abject disaster.
No, it was an abject failure because they didn't know what they were doing.
Um,
I know people who do remote learning and do it well. My own kids went through the schools during the remote learning. Their grades were fantastic. They learned. Why? Because we knew how to do remote learning where most of the school systems didn't. And in fact, I complained to our school system because of idiot teachers that did not have a clue what they were doing. So, yes, it's not the concept of remote learning that's the problem, it's the implementation. Now,
but it
what
is a
happened here,
problem when you're paying. Wait, it is a problem when you're paying taxes, and you're paying taxes for schools. You're not paying taxes for remote learning. Okay, you can do that if that's what you want to do. That's what your floats your boat. Fine, but you're paying taxes, and you should not be um, put on a second tiered status because of migrants. End of story.
no, you shouldn't be put on a second tier because of migrants, but remote learning for the day, or even if they had planned it for the week, is not the problem. The problem is with the students at home. Most of these students have working parents. The parents were not notified until the day before that their kids weren't going to be able to go to school, which means now you've got to change your work schedule. This goes way beyond the idea of remote learning. This
I
is
don't even think it's that.
impacting
I don't think it's that.
students. It's
I don't think it's that
impacting
complicated.
parents. It's
It's
impacting the economy. It
yes, it is. It's
impacts
getting to the
everything.
it impacts, like I said before. You don't have to get into all the particulars. It's your taxpayer. You pay for the school. You pay maybe to build it. You pay for the teachers. Okay, to have migrants come in there is unbelievable. If I was
No,
a parent in
no,
that
you
area,
do
I would
no.
be going ballistic.
You are 100% wrong on this. You do have to get into the policy and the implications, because what you're doing right now is the same thing that the Democrats are doing. You're going for that emotional response instead of actually looking at what the problem is causing and how to deal with it.
Well, no, I don't think I'm looking at the emotions of it. I'm looking at the fact that I'm a taxpayer. I'm paying for that school. I'm paying for my kid to be in that school. I might be working. I'm not paying all those taxes, and a lot of taxes go to education to have my school turned it into a migrant camp.
The school was turned into a migrant camp for a grand total of 24 hours, if that. the taxpayers are getting shafted on a much larger scale by what's being given to the migrants. Never mind putting them in a safe spot for 24 hours. Look at feeding them. Look at housing them. Look at all of the benefits we just said earlier in this podcast that these places are trying to give them health care. The problem is bigger than taking them out of a storm and putting them in a public building for 24 hours.
Yes, but it's indicative of how this problem has escalated to a border problem, to an American problem, when you don't have enough facilities and you have a numbnuts in charge that you're putting people in schools. Obviously, this is not being well thought out. It's a disaster.
Well, it's not being thought out at all. And that lays at the feet of the federal government because they keep claiming, well, we need more people to process, so Congress has to give us more money. No, you don't need more people to process. What you need to do is actually enforce the existing laws. If you don't come into the country at a given checkpoint, you don't get in, you don't get processed. If you come into the country without seeking asylum at the first country you entered, you don't get in, you don't get processed. If you do these things and we start processing you, you stay in Mexico until the processing is done. These are all laws that are on the books that the federal government is ignoring. That's where
By
this
choice.
lies. Yes,
Because the
by
big
choice.
scheme, the big strategy is that they'll replace the voters that they've lost. A new dependent class by design. Again, it's all about power and not about America. And speaking of America, over 50 years ago, we went to the moon, and fast forward, the first moon mission to be launched from American soil failed. Oh well.
It did fail. Unfortunately, there was a problem with a fuel leak, which is not unheard of in rockets not going to the moon, never mind going to the moon. Unfortunately, this was a brand new spacecraft built by Lockheed Martin and Boeing. It did well in smaller tests, but there was a failure once it launched. So unfortunately, we will not be going back to the moon on this launch. And I believe because of it, NASA has actually scaled back their plans, which is, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely unthinkable. We should have had a scientific research facility on the moon back in 1999. Uh, the
There you
fact
go.
the fact that
Yes.
we haven't been back there in 50 years is ridiculous. In over 50, is absolutely ridiculous. We made
Well,
scientific advances thanks to the space program that were what was one of the reasons for the runaway economic growth that the country had, and we ignored it, and we fell behind, and now we've got to pick up our pants, put on the big boy pants and get back on the horse and move.
I'm more cynical than you, Dr. Lopkin. I think with the dumbing down of America, we'd launch the craft. It probably would end up in like Bridgeport, Connecticut, or something. I have
Well, no,
no faith. Yes,
I
we've
think
been
the
talking
problem
about this.
is
We,
I
we've
think the
been
pro-
talking about this for like 25 years. We got some with no computers, 1962, when JFK made his speech. And what, like 7 years later, we're on the moon. We've been screwing around with this for 25 years.
Okay. First of all, we didn't do it without computers. There were computers. They weren't terribly powerful, but we did have
There you
them
go.
and we did use them. Second of all, I think it goes back to the best and the brightest don't go into government. This was a government contract, government contractors, and a government agency that was working on this. I think Elon Musk is still determined to go to Mars. I think let him, get the stuff to the moon. I'm pretty sure SpaceX can do it better than NASA can.
And that's the real question. Is NASA become obsolete? And by the way, when I mentioned the computers, yes, the entire computing capability of NASA, you have more in your cell phone, and they went to
Yes.
the moon. Okay, so is NASA obsolete? For me, it's basically deja vu all over again. They do the same shitty mission over and over. Mars, 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 Mars. Boring. Let's do something different. And I 100% agree with you. We should have had moon based observation and research facilities and living facilities back 20 years ago.
Okay.
It would have maybe captivated a whole new generation. The space shuttle did jack shit.
No, the space shuttle didn't
Waste.
captivate anybody. I'm going to say no. NASA is not obsolete because NASA has done some recent missions that did not get the media coverage that it should have, but they were, from a scientific point of view, absolutely amazing. Not the least of which was not that long ago landing a craft on a moving asteroid, taking samples from the asteroid and getting it home. This was something that had never been done from a logistics and a scientific standpoint. It was an incredible achievement, and they managed to do it. The problem is the media doesn't hype these things anymore. It's like, oh well, they got some rocks, they got some samples. No,
I think they're more
that's
interested in the
that's burying the
diversity of the
lead.
mission.
Yeah,
They would be more interested in the
that's
diversity.
burying the lead. We need to be paying attention to what is actually being accomplished rather than who is accomplishing it, and is it a diverse crew?
Well said. Um, that concludes another edition of Carnivore Bites. Very spirited edition. A lot of information
Yes.
on the table. And we talk to our listeners about some of the new things that you and the sister podcasts are doing now. The trails they are blazing.
Yes, we have a brand new Xvadio channel on the Apple Podcasts app. You can catch Carnivore Radio there, as well as all of our sister podcasts, which we do have a number of them. This is actually the 15th anniversary
Oh,
of Xvadio, and we are going to be rolling out new things across the year. Not again. The new Apple channel is the first of them. You can, of course, find out about all of these things by following Xvadio on Facebook. We have the Xvadio Facebook page as well as the Carnivore Radio Facebook page, and of course, let us know what you're thinking. Reach out to us on either one of those pages. We'd love to hear from you. And of course, you can hear every episode of Carnivore Bites on the new Xvadio channel, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and just about every platform out there.
well, thank you, Dr. Lopkin. And I'll make a promise to you. If I decide to take a week vacation or go get elective surgery, I'll tell you before the podcast so you don't have white noise. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Thank you. Take care, Dr. Lopkin. See you next week.
We'll see you then.